Hello everyone, Babyjace here, and welcome to my Mythic Archimonde raid guide. Mythic Archimonde is probably one of the most difficult and challenging bosses that they have done in a long time, and it certainly shows with all the changes that they made to every single one of his mechanics. Archimonde is going to be a 3-phase encounter, with Phase 3 being completely new to Mythic. Phase 1 and 2 still have the same exact mechanics, with nothing new being added. However, each ability that he does maybe has a little twist to it, and I'll be going over that more as we go along. I'll be going over each of the phases changes and then talk about how you will want to deal with each of these mechanics and as you go along in the phase. So first I'm going to talk about Phase 1 mechanics, and then I'm going to talk about how you're going to want to handle Phase 1 itself, and then I'll go to Phase 2, and then I'll go to Phase 3. So for Phase 1, Phase 1 still has the same mechanics: Doomfire, Allure of Flames, Shadow Burst, Deathcaller, and Desecrate. I'm going to go over which each one does now on Mythic. Doomfire. Doomfire will still spawn from a Doomfire Spirit, and the Doomfire Spirit will still fixate on someone as a trail of fire follows them. However, the main change from Heroic to Mythic is that the Doomfire itself can now be picked up off the ground when you run over it. On Heroic, whenever you walked over it, it stayed on the ground and you just got a stacking debuff. However, on Mythic, you actually pull it off the ground and is no longer there for 12 seconds. What this means is that you can keep grabbing as many Doomfires as you want, up to 15 stacks. You can't go over 15. However, every stack of Doomfire you grab does more and more damage. And after 12 seconds, you will drop all of your stacks back on the ground. Allure of Flames. Just like in Heroic, Archimonde will attempt to grab all of the fire that's currently on the floor and, move them onto the raid. The major change, however, going into Mythic is that for every stack of Doomfire not picked up when this cast finishes, Archimonde will now deal 50,000 damage to the raid. While this doesn't sound like much, to give you an example of how much damage this is, if you don't soak any of the fire from one Doomfire Spirit, that is enough damage to wipe you. Even 4 stacks is enough to wipe you, as it is 200,000 damage. And generally there's other things also going on, and all that damage added up is... someone's probably gonna die, and you really can't have deaths to this. Next up is Shadow Burst. Just like on Heroic, he's gonna send someone up in the air, and they'll have a purple circle underneath them, and you need to split the damage. On Mythic, this does 900,000 damage, but it now sends it onto 3 people instead of just 1. That means 3 ranges are going to have it, and you will need to split the damage from all 3 ranges. Generally, you can have 2 people per circle, and that's usually enough to make sure no one's dying. The Deathcaller. Nothing is pretty much changed with the Deathcaller. He still goes on the tank, and it is the main tank swap mechanic. However, since it's Mythic, the Deathcaller will now have more health, and it'll now deal more damage. So it's pretty important that this thing dies, because it's going to be up a lot longer. But after the first ad, you really don't want to hit it too much. Like, it'll die passively to everyone's cleaves. It should anyways. But you really need to put as much damage as you can into the boss. Like, the boss, you really need to be pushing the boss as fast as you can throughout the phases, so your damage control is very important. Like in Phase 1, just the ad is not life-threatening after that first pillar comes up, because now you're completely immuning all of the shadow damage that it deals. Now, to make the DPS check, you're going to want to use your ring on the pole, and you're going to want to use it on cooldown when it comes up. And the reason being is because you really don't want to use Lust in Phase 1. Using Lust in Phase 1 is really bad. It makes Phase 3 a lot harder if you use Lust in Phase 1. And it's honestly, if you're at Mythic Archimonde, your DPS should be high enough that you are able to beat that 4th Doomfire Spirit without having to have Lust on the pole. And finally, Desecrate. There is absolutely nothing new about Desecrate from Heroic to Mythic. It'll still spawn a pillar, the pillars will still spawn orbs, and each pillar will deal 50,000 damage. However, because it is Mythic, Phase 1 is going to last a lot longer than it did on Heroic, and you're going to have a lot more of these pillars up when you are trying to push into Phase 2. To give you an example, you can have around 4 to 5 pillars, and the orbs that are spawning around them despawn around 30 seconds after they appear. So you really need to make sure that you're moving the boss around to the next pillar. Let's talk about how you're going to have to deal with all of these mechanics in Phase 1. There are 2 DPS checks that you're going to have to meet in Phase 1 in order to successfully complete the fight. Well, actually there's kind of 3, but I'll go over the third one more later. The first major DPS check is the 4th Doomfire Spirit. You cannot get this Doomfire Spirit. If you get a 4th Doomfire Spirit, you pretty much wipe, so that's pretty much what you need to beat. You have to beat that 4th Doomfire Spirit. And I'll go over how you can help buy yourself some time on the 4th Doomfire Spirit. The second DPS check is that you need to push the Desecrate after his Shadow Burst, but before the second Doomfire Spirit comes out. And the reason is this buys you more time on Doomfire Spirits. If you push the Desecrate after the Shadow Burst, he has to do his RP with the Desecrate, and the pillar has to come up and everything, and this buys you about 10 to 15 seconds on the second Doomfire, which in turn buys you 10 and 15 seconds on the 4th Doomfire. And this is pretty important on this fight. The third DPS check of this phase is the Doomfire Spirits themselves. Now, it doesn't matter how fast you kill them, you're always going to get 10 stacks of Doomfire on the ground, no matter what. Even if you nuke this thing in 1 second, it'll still drop 10 stacks under it when it dies. The main thing you want to beat is you have to beat 15 stacks on Doomfire 1, 2, and 3. Now Doomfire 1, it's really easy to beat this, but Doomfire 2 and 3 is a lot harder, because no one has their cooldowns up from the pull. Now, the lower the number to 10 that you can get, the better, and you generally want to aim around 11 to 13 stacks. Now, maybe 14 or 15 stacks doesn't seem like too much, but it actually makes quite a difference. And the main reason why this is important is because depending on how fast you kill these Doomfire Spirits is how much easier your Phase 2 is going to be. Killing the Doomfire Spirits fast enough is the only way you can make Phase 2 easier. It is the only thing you can do in Phase 1 to make your Phase 2 easier. The only thing. So it's very important that you are killing these as fast as you can. This means every single person in the raid needs to swap to these. Tanks, everyone. Everyone has to swap to these. And you need to maximize your damage. So for example, a Death Knight might want to Soul Reaper when the ad's at 70%, and generally the Soul Reaper will explode depending on your raid's DPS when it falls below 45%. For monks, you don't want to put a clone on it. You want to just full on single target this ad. Like, you need all the damage you can get. This ad matters a great deal. The next thing I want to talk about in Phase 1 is the Desecrate. Now, this is one of the trickiest mechanics of Phase 1 because you want the pillars to spawn very close to the boss in a set path or order to make it easier for your raid and for your positioning. And the main reason why is because you need to have a light orb up at all times. If you do not have a light orb up when the second or the third pillar is up, you're probably gonna die. Like, this is a lot of damage. If none of the range have a light orb up, this is going to strain your healer's mana greatly and someone is going to die. There's no way looking around it. Like, everyone needs a light orb debuff and you need to maximize them the best you can. For example, when we are getting ready to hit an orb, the range are going to want to stack near an orb and have one person assigned to just hitting it so that everyone gets the debuff. Same thing with the melee. Generally the tanks are in control of when the melee are getting their orbs, and this is because the shadow damage that the Death Caller deals is pretty astronomically high. Like, this ad does a lot of damage, and if you're a tank and you don't have the orb debuff, you're actually going to die really fast because not only is the ad doing a crazy amount of shadow damage to you, but he's increasing the amount of shadow damage you take, and every single pillar is ticking for 50,000 shadow damage. So you absolutely have to have that orb debuff at all times. Now, I'm not 100% certain on how spawning the pillars works, but what we generally found out is that you have to think of the area as like a grid system, and he wants to spawn the pillars on the closest grid that he is in. So for example, as you see in front of you, he's gonna spawn the pillar like to his like back right or to his right a bit, and that's kind of where we want that first pillar to go. And then after that pillar is spawned, we want to move the boss to the left more, to making sure that his red circle, like when you're targeting the boss, that red circle, you want to make sure that red circle is completely away from that first pillar. And you want to make sure the boss is to the left of that pillar. And what that'll do, it'll make the second pillar spawn to the left of the first one. And then, really, you can move him up and he'll spawn pillars like on the grids closest to him, but like it's kind of tricky. You really don't want him to spawn. Like, if you move him too much or too crazy, he might spawn a pillar really far away. And this just means you have to move your entire raid to that new pillar, because, like I said, the orbs are the most important part of this phase. Or maybe not the most important, but it's very important. So you definitely want your entire raid moving next to the pillars so that you have your debuffs. Now that we've talked about Phase 1, let's talk about what the mechanics in Phase 2 are going to be like. Phase 2 is probably the hardest phase of the entire fight, because it's so easy to die here, and you really want to get into Phase 3 with all of your B-reses up. Doomfire makes a return from Phase 1, and it basically just sits there for the majority of Phase 2 on the markers that you place them from Phase 1. And just like in Phase 1, you also have to pick up the Doomfire when he is casting a lure, so that when an allure cast finishes, there is no Doomfire on the ground. Because if there's any Doomfire on the ground when allure finishes, he's going to deal 50,000 fire damage to everyone in the raid for every stack that is on the ground. Not only that, but the Deathcaller is still going to be there from Phase 1. But however, in Phase 2, the Deathcaller deals a lot of damage, and this is because you no longer have an orb that is giving you a shadow damage immunity. So the damage on the tank is going to ramp up pretty damn fast. And so basically what this means is in Phase 2, the highest DPS priority is going to be the Deathcaller, because it has to die as soon as you can. Now that we've gotten those mechanics out of the way, let's talk about the new mechanics to Phase 2. In Phase 2, Archimonde is still going to put Shackled Torment out on 3 players. However, it works a little bit differently in Phase 2. In Phase 2, Shackled Torment is going to still do ramping damage until it's broken, but when it's broken, instead of dealing damage to the entire raid, it instead deals 1.5 million damage to anyone within 25 yards of where the soul is standing in midair. And to break the shackle, you have to move 30 yards away from it. This adds a little bit of difficulty, and I'll talk more about how you want to deal with it later on, but I just wanted to throw out what it did. The next change to this phase is Rot of Chaos. On Heroic Mode, Rot of Chaos went on one person, and that one person shot it off to one other person, who then shot it off to another person. However, on Mythic, Rot of Chaos goes out on 10 of your raiders, who will then shoot it off to the other 10 raiders that didn't have it. And it goes back and forth like this 3 times. What this basically means is that Rot of Chaos is going to be very difficult because you need to have your raid in such a way where no one's getting double hit. And there's a lot of add-ons that really help with this, but in the end, you need to be very careful with how you move with Rot of Chaos. And lastly, at 55%, the boss summons a bunch of adds periodically, and there's just more dogs than there were on Heroic. There's a lot more dogs that come out. It's like 5 or 6 dogs, and that's quite a bit. And what makes these especially difficult is because they're going to be blinking around and doing their AoE silence, and it does like 150k damage at the same time that Rot of Chaos is going out. So it's very important that not only do you not get hit by the dogs when Rot of Chaos is going out, but that you don't move with Rot of Chaos in such a way where you're going to hit other people and cause them to die. And then of course the Fellborn Overfiend will also be coming periodically with the dogs. And he just needs to be interrupted every 25% of his health, or else he'll get off like a 200k AoE cast. And while this isn't an automatic wipe, but I mean, if he does it when like Rod of Chaos is going out or the raid is at like half health, like, I mean, it could cause a couple people to die. So it's really easy to avoid deaths. So now that we've talked about what the mechanics of Phase 2 are, let's talk a little more in-depth on how to counter them. So, to counter the Allure of Flames, you again have to send out 3 people to soak the 3 piles of Allure of Flames, or of the Doomfire, so that when the Allure of Flames cast goes off, there is no Doomfire on the ground, and instead it is 3 separate people who have them. Now, the best job for this in Phase 2 is going to be 1 tank, your Disc Priest, and someone with a strong cooldown or immunity. And you're generally going to get 4 Allure of Flames in Phase 2. If you're getting 5, it's because people are dead or your damage is really, really far behind. So you really only want to plan for 4 of them. Now, for the first one, what we did is we had the tank without the Doomcaller. By the way, if you are ever soaking the Doomfire as a tank, you can never be having the Deathcaller. The Deathcaller tank has to be tanking the boss. Because if you are tanking the Deathcaller and the fire, you will die. Straight up, you're going to die. So don't do that. But for the first Allure of Flames in Phase 2, we use a tank, a hunter, and a Disc Priest. And then for the second Allure of Flames, we used a tank, a Disc Priest, and our second hunter. For the third Allure of Flames, we used, again, a tank, a Disc Priest, and then we used a Warlock. Or no, we used a Mage. And for the fourth, we ended up using a tank and double Mage. And the reason why towards the end you want like double Mage and not the Disc Priest is on Allure of Flames 4, he actually starts casting it the second Rot of Chaos finishes. And so you have about, if you don't, what this basically means is it's a 1.5 second cast for Allure of Flames. And this means that all the people soaking the fire on the ground, you actually have to soak it before the third Rot of Chaos happens. So you're going to be soaking and taking the 200k damage from the Rot of Chaos and moving around. So it's very important that your healer is able to heal the raid and shield them, because I guarantee you people are going to get double hit, because the people who are soaking the fire, they have no choice. They have to soak the fire. As for the third Allure of Flames, it comes pretty fast after the third set of Rot of Chaos is done, but still plenty of time where you can soak you can soak after all the Rot of Chaos is done. Like, you don't have to soak during Rot of Chaos like you do on the fourth Allure of Flames. I want to note that they made a hotfix to this fight where if you have 1 stack of the Doomfire, you cannot be targeted with shackles. And this is very important for Rot of Chaos number 4 and for Allure of Flames 4. You really, really, really do not want the people who are soaking Doomfire get shackled on the Rot of Chaos 4. So you're going to want to have to pick up 1 stack early so that you are completely ineligible for getting shackled. If you do happen to get shackled, you need to break it really fast, and unfortunately, with all the chaos that's going on at that part of the fight, you're probably going to end up killing people. So again, you just need to soak 1 of the Doomfires. Just 1 stack of Doomfire will make you ineligible for shackle. As for shackled itself, generally what happens is the first shackle will come after the first Rot of Chaos is done. And you kind of want to be spread out for Rot of Chaos, but as soon as it's done, everyone needs to get close to the boss so that shackles are pretty close to the boss and stacked near each other. And once that happens, the entire raid needs to move away from those shackled, and someone needs to count down slowly when to break. You know, like 3, 2, 1, just be comfortable with when to break. And it's very important that you have a weak aura or the ERT, which shows the range of the shackled, so that you're not standing in someone else's shackle range. And it's very important that you don't break early. If for some reason you have to break early or you have to break late, you need to call this over Mumble so that people are aware. And again, there's always going to be polls where people don't break when it's called to break, and a few of your players are going to run back into the circle, assuming it is already broken, at the exact same time that it's currently being broken, and they're going to die, and they're going to blame the person for breaking late. It's really easy to see that a shackle hasn't been broken. There's really no excuse for dying to this. You need to just be aware, okay, that person hasn't broken his shackle yet, I shouldn't go into it, or else you're going to die, and it happens a lot. So just be prepared for that to happen as well. After the first shackle breaks, you want to get together around the boss. His first Allure of Flames is going to go out, and then he's going to start doing Rod of Chaos again. You want to be close to the boss this time for this Rod of Chaos because the shackle actually goes out during the second Rod of Chaos. And what this means is if you do get targeted with the shackle, you just cannot get hit by a second Rod of Chaos beam or you're probably going to die. It's very important that you are not getting double hit with your shackled, and healers just need to be aware that they need to be healed, and because you cannot let them die. Again, if they die, it will cause the shackle to go off, and that is 1.5 million AoE damage to everyone within 25 yards of the soul that is in midair, the Shadow Soul. Once the second Rot of Chaos is done, everyone needs to move back to where they were at the start of Phase 2 for the first Rot of Chaos. Go back to your starting position, and again count down for the shackle to break. He's going to be casting Allure of Flames coming out of this, and you really need to make sure that all of the fire is soaked up. Around this time, the dogs will start coming out, and you want to just start AoEing them. If you have you want your Unholy Death Knight to AoE them, and your Moonkin's passive Starfall to AoE them. After he does the Allure and the dogs are out, he will do his third shackled here. Everyone needs to go back to where they were for the second Rot of Chaos for this shackled, because you need to break them as soon as you can. And pretty much as soon as you break them, he will be going into his third Rot Chaos. This Rot Chaos is actually kind of brutal. It's pretty intense because you have 3 people coming in who were shackled, and you also have people coming in from soaking the fire, so just be very, very careful with this one. Once he is finished doing the third set of Rot of Chaos, he is going to cast Allure of Flames very fast very fast, so you need to make sure you're soaking very fast. And then once he does that, he will also use Shackled again, and then you just need to go back to your starting position. And that's pretty much how this phase works out. You go somewhere for Rot, Shackles happen, you move away from them to your second stack point, you do Rot there, Shackles happen there, you move back to the first stack point, your Rot happens there, Shackles happen there, you move back to the second stack point, you just kind of go back and forth like that. Once he does the third shackle, go back to your starting position, and this is probably the hardest part of the entire fight. And the reason again is because he does his Allure of Flames pretty much the fourth Rod of Chaos finishes. That is when he starts casting Allure of Flames, and it's a very short cast. So you need to be soaking fire early on. After the second blast of Rod of Chaos in that fourth set, that's pretty much when you need to start soaking all of your fire. And the reason why we chose 2 mages to do this and a tank is because, again, tank is obvious, they don't really take a lot of damage. And the 2 mages is because they can greater invis while they are soaking the fire, and then they can use Ice Block and completely immune all of the fire damage and the Rot Chaos blast that'll hit them. And you generally want Arcane Mages for this because you really, really want the Glyph of Ice Block. This will make your Ice Block give you a further 3-second immunity after it fades. And this is very, very, very important for the Doomfire because it is 12 seconds that it lasts on you. If you don't have 2 mages for this, it's a lot harder. You need someone with a immunity, someone who's not going to take damage, because soaking the Doomfire here and getting hit by that Rot Chaos is such an easy way to die. And if you die here, there is no time to recover and soak the fire. You will wipe instantly because he's going to Allure of Flames, and that's going to kill everyone. Note that the last set of Shackle does go out before he finishes his Rot of Chaos. Make sure they don't die. We used a lot of cooldowns here. Like, I'm pretty sure we used Devotion Aura, we used Rallying Cry. We used quite a bit of cooldowns here so that people with Shackled just would not die. And for these Shackled, we actually opted not to break them. We figured that since the boss was already so low as it was, like he was already at 42%, that he was so close to pushing to phase 3, that breaking those shackles wasn't important. Just make sure your healers don't let them die. And don't stand in the dog's little AoE silence. Just wanted to say a couple things before we go into phase 3. The death colors are the #1 deepest priority in this phase, and you're going to want to use your 3 minutes as they come up on the first death color. And this death color should die pretty fast. As for your ring, you're going to want to use it 10 seconds before the 3rd death color comes out. This allows you to build up damage with your ring on the dogs, and that you'll explode on the boss and the death color itself. For the 4th death color, make sure you have some CDs going into your tank. We use double vigilance for our tank so that he wouldn't die to it while we are transitioning into phase 3. And just make sure you kill this death color before you go to phase 3. If you go into phase 3 with the death collar and it has high HP, your tank is almost 100% going to die. Alright everyone, here it is, phase 3. Phase 3 is brand new on Mythic and it is not seen on Heroic Archimonde. Phase 3 introduces a bunch of new mechanics that are also exclusive to Mythic, as well as some old mechanics from Phase 3 Heroic Archimonde that are being reused a little differently. Let's talk about what each mechanic in Phase 3 is, and then go over later about how you want to deal with them. The first mechanic you will notice in Phase 3 is Conduit. Conduit is a ability that he does on 3 ranged members, and it'll place a small little orb thing, dark orb energy thing, on a ranged member, and he'll cast it 3 of them very fast. And what this does is it deals 300k shadow damage when it lands on that player. If a conduit is spawned within 8 yards of another conduit, it will also deal 300k shadow damage to the entire raid, and this will almost 100% cause a wipe. The next mechanic is Mark of the Legion. Archimonde puts out 4 Mark of the Legion debuffs on 4 different random players. It could be anyone. The only players he can't target are tanks. And each Mark of the Legion has a different expiration. So there's going to be one that expires short, and then short, medium, medium, and then long. And what these basically do is they do 1.5 million damage on the player who has Mark of the Legion and sends them skyrocketing to the moon. However, if you soak with other players in your raid with this, you will reduce the amount of knockback that you will take, and so you won't get knocked off the platform, and you also split the damage with everyone. The downside to this is, if you do soak Mark of the Legion, you take 600% more damage from further Mark of the Legions. This means you cannot stack everyone in the raid to soak Mark of the Legion. You need to split the raid up into 4 separate groups. The next mechanic is called Seething Corruption. This is basically the safety dance. This mechanic isn't too difficult, and there's 4 set patterns that he does, and he will randomly choose which one of the 4 that he will use. And as you see on your screen here, you will see all 4 different patterns. And it's very important that you're going to want someone to memorize these so that they can call it out on the fly which one it is. The next mechanic is called Source of Chaos, and this is the main tank mechanic of the fight. Source of Chaos will currently go on Archimonde's highest threat target. It does not mean it goes on his current tank target. If the current tank target has less threat than the other tank, it will still go on the other tank. And what this does is it will channel a beam on them, a laser beam, that will push them off the platform and make them take increasing damage. Now you can reduce the amount of pushback it does by standing in the beam, but you will take a lot of damage if you do this, and it also puts a debuff on you. The next 2 mechanics were taken straight from Heroic Archimonde, but they have like a slight twist. They work a little differently. The first is Reign of Chaos, and these are the Infernals that he summons. Now every minute Archimonde will summon Infernals, increasing every time he does the cast. So the first time he does Infernals, 3 of them will come down. The second time, 3 again will come down. The third time, 4 will come down. The 4th time, 4 will come down. The 5th time, 4 will come down. And the 6th time, 5 of them will come down. Now, standing in the circle that shows where they're going to spawn will deal 200,000 fire damage to you, and standing outside of the circle will deal 100,000 fire damage to you. It's very important you do not stand in these circles. You are most likely going to die, as these come out directly after a Mark of the Legion. Again, these work just like the Infernals from Heroic. If they are within 15 yards of each other, they will heal each other for 8% of their health. However, because this is Mythic, they regenerate their energy way faster. After 12 seconds, they will start pulsing fire damage, and you will quickly wipe if these are not killed fast. And the final mechanic of Phase 3 is the Void Stars. Now, these do the exact same thing they did on Heroic. However, there is now 4 of them, and it eventually increases to 5 of them throughout the fight. But they do the exact same thing as Heroic. They'll fixate someone, and they will rush to them. All you really need to do for these is slow them and kill them. Like, they have 600k HP. They die very, very, very fast. Now I'm going to show you how we did Phase 3. Now I'm going to show it through a bunch of different point of views, from me to the ranged. Now Phase 3 is heavily scripted, so it's going to be pretty consistent pull to pull, so there's really not going to be much RNG involved in this phase. Phase 3 starts when the boss hits 40%, and you're going to fall down into the nether. Now, as soon as you land, make sure all your range go to the right side of the platform facing the boss, and this is because dark conduits are going to be coming out almost as soon as you start landing. Once the dark conduits do happen though, you pretty much have maybe like 5-ish seconds of DPSing the boss before he does Mark of the Legion. Now the way we do Mark of the Legion is we have 4 markers set up: front left, front right, back left, back right. And we have a weak aura that assigns the shortest persons to the back left and back right, and the longer debuffs to the front left and front right. And pretty much that you go on the marker and you stand behind them. Now when the Infernals are coming out, make sure they're separated. If Infernals are spawning on top of each other, you can use a Death Knight's grip to split them apart, and you can definitely use Hunter taunts and Warrior taunts to also split them apart. Make sure you're killing the Infernals like ASAP, it's the most important thing. Now, the general tactic of what you want to do going into this phase is you want to have 2 B-reses up, and this allows you to sacrifice tanks to the Source of Chaos. And this saves you 10 million damage per Source of Chaos. However, this first Source of Chaos is pretty easy to cleave down with the boss because you're going to have the ring up and all of your lust and cooldowns, because yes, as soon as you kill all the Infernals, you are going to lust and burn the boss, and you can pretty much cleave the Source of Chaos down, so just in case someone dies, you can B-res them later on in the fight. Now, when you do use your lust, make sure everyone except the Warlocks are using their DPS potions. And this is because the Warlocks are going to save their DPS potions for the Wave 3 of Infernals. And this allows you to pretty much kill Wave 3 a lot easier, because the Warlocks will have DPS potions plus their Dark Soul available. Now, once you've dealt with the Source of Chaos, he's going to cast Seething Corruption, and this is the dance. Just make sure that you pay attention to the patterns that are being presented, someone calls it out, and that you don't get hit, because this deals a great deal amount of damage. Coming out of the dance is going to be the Void Stars. Make sure you kill these. These has very low HP, 600k each, and there's going to be 4 or 5 of them, 2 up front, 2 to 3 in the back. Once that's done, he is going to send out the Mark of the Legions again, and you need to do all 4 groups properly again. Once those Mark of the Legions are done, he's going to start Reign of Chaos number 2. I forgot to mention, you're going to want to set up healer cooldowns for every single wave of Infernals, and you're going to have 4 wave of Infernals that you need cooldowns set up for. Now, during these Infernals, he's going to start his Source of Chaos again. Depending on how many B-reses you have, you're going to want to let your tank die like how we did here, because this saves you 10 million damage from your tank. After that source is another set of dance, and then immediately after this dance, he starts doing Dark Conduit. Do not stand near other Dark Conduits. Make sure everyone is spread out so you're not getting chunked down by all the damage. After that Dark Conduit, he's going to do the Mark of the Legion again, and you are going to have to again stack on your markers. Make sure you get to the back markers as soon as you can. Once the Mark of the Legion is done, he's going to send out Void Stars, and these Void Stars are going to immediately transition into Infernals again. And this is the first set of 4 Infernals that you will be dealing with, and Warlocks will need to use Dark Soul and their DPS potions to kill these. Remember, there are 4 of them now, and all 4 of them have to die within 12 seconds of them spawning, and as they are being killed, the next dance is starting to happen. As you can see here, everything in this phase starts happening faster and faster and faster, and that is what makes it so difficult. And coming out of that dance is he then does Source of Chaos. Again, depending on your B-res situation, you can let your tank die like we did, and you can just B-res him. After that Source of Chaos, it's going to go immediately into the next Void Stars, so make sure you do kill them as soon as you can. After those Void Stars is going to be Mark of the Legion once again, and just make sure you get in your groups and you're not like exploding on multiple groups. And then after that Mark of the Legion is the next set of Infernals, and this is where you're going to want to use your DPS ring, because these Infernals are going to be the last Infernals that you will be killing, and you need all the damage you can get on them. So make sure you use your DPS ring and you just nuke them down. During those Infernals, by the way, he does use Dark Conduit. And immediately after the Dark Conduit and the Infernals are dead, Void Stars happen again. And as soon as those Void Stars are about to die or halfway through dying, he does his next dance. Make sure you keep slowing the Void Stars so they don't blow half your raid off the platform. Coming out of this dance, he's going to cast the next Mark of the Legion, and this Mark of the Legion happens almost immediately. So make sure you get to your spots ASAP. After that Mark of the Legion, he does the next Source of Chaos, and you are again going to let your tank die here, and your B-res should come up around 15 seconds after this Source of the Chaos kills your tank. And then coming out of that Source of the Chaos is another dance. Again, you can see everything's happening faster and faster. And then after this dance, he's going to do conduits. Make sure you do not stand near other conduits, as well as the Infernals are coming down. You are 100% going to ignore these Infernals because the boss needs to die right around now. When those Infernals come out, you have 12 seconds before they start pulsing and wiping you. And assuming you did all that properly and you get to phase 3 enough in practice, you will be killing this boss. Now, again, most of these mechanics in phase 3 aren't that difficult. What makes them hard is they start chain gunning faster and faster and faster, and that's the true difficulty of phase 3. If you found this guide helpful, or you have any tips for me at all, go ahead and leave them in the comment section. If you have questions, leave them in the comment section. If you enjoyed the guide, hit subscribe, hit the like button. I'm so sorry that it is so long, but there is all the mechanics from Heroic to Mythic were changed. There's so many new mechanics on this fight, and everything needs to be handled properly, or you will just be wiping endlessly. This boss is by far the hardest boss they have ever done. It is way harder than Ragnaros and way harder than Lei Shin ever was, and it truly shows that it's a great boss. Now, that's pretty much all I really have for now. I will